All right. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm glad all of you guys are here today. And those online, thanks for joining us and be part of our family. As you know, livingmessiah.com is our website. You can find other information there, other videos and what have you. Also, you can find the donation button there. And I want to thank all of you who do donate to this ministry and being part of it. We so appreciate you, and we thank you for that. So let me open in prayer, and then we can get right into our study here. Father, Yahweh, great and mighty you are. There is none like you. Father, we thank you for your faithfulness to your words, who you are, and Father, the love and the guidance that you display towards us, not only through your words, but through the principles and the things that are contained in your words and these events and the stories that you have us look into, Father. And that's what we want to draw closer to you. We want to understand, Father, you are what we need, and we're finding that more and more. So, Father, be with us today as we study your words and empower us and help us in all our endeavors that are ahead of us. We thank you again for the love that we find in your Messiah, Yeshua, our Messiah and our King. Amen. All right, and okay, I did that. Oh, comments and questions, as you guys always know. There's 2 mics out there. Just raise your hand, and they will find their way to you for a question or a comment. We just ask be kind of brief. That way others, if there's other things that others would like to share, that they can participate in too. And let's stay on point. That's very important, to stay on point what we're talking about. So we all can learn together, because I'm learning along with you. So I want to, okay, as far as review, we're obviously in chapter 16 here in Acts. Paul is revisiting the places that he has in the past, and he will be visiting, it looks like, some other newer places that he hasn't been. He's taken those decrees or those foundational things that the Jerusalem Council came together on, as far as new believers in the God of Israel, and the standards, the 4 basic standards set down for them to adhere in their life as they progress and learn more and more about their Creator. And that would be through the Shabbat and learning through Moses, okay? So what we have Paul going out, revisiting these places. Timothy has now joined the group as well. So we have Paul, Silas, and now Timothy, who's newly circumcised here. So I would imagine they waited for him to heal up before they headed out. I would hope so. You will notice someone else will be joining them as well. His name is not mentioned, but when we get to that point, I'll point that out to you. And I think it's interesting there. So we got some comments that we can visit there as well. And a thumbs up is always nice for all of you out there. So we're going to continue on here. And having passed through, I'm going to try my best to pronounce these words. I have little things, so I'm going to try my best here. They passed through Phrygia, and they came to the Galatian country. They were forbidden by the set-apart Spirit to speak a word in Asia. Then they came to Musa. Okay, they tried to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit of Yeshua did not allow them. So we'll take a look at this. I had to enlarge in my map, so I had to look and enlarge in the map more to give you more geologic, a frame. So we know we left from Jerusalem, went up to Antioch, and look at them go. And then Iconium, they picked up Timothy, and then they're in this area of Musa, okay? That's where they're at this point. So as the story continues to go on here, I do want to point out something. 6 and 7. And this is something interesting for us to discuss. I think it is. They were forbidden by the set-apart Spirit to speak the word. So in some sense, the Spirit didn't allow them. So what do you think that means? Well, it strictly says the Spirit told them not to go speak there. I understand that, okay? That's what the text says, but ultimately, do you think that means something a little bit more? Because it's interesting here. Some of your translations might say the Spirit in 7, but in verse 7, but a lot of the translations will have the Spirit of Yeshua, which that terminology is very limited. It doesn't pop up a whole lot of times in the scriptures. So, in my thought process, and some of the commentary was like, okay, this Spirit, the Spirit of Yeshua, or the set-apart Spirit, seems to be one and the same here, okay? What came to my mind? Do we use this terminology today? And I'm doing this specifically for us to think about things in a sense. Let me add this to this whole thought process. Do we give excuses to the Spirit for things that are going on in our life? And what I mean by that is, okay, they came to this place and all of a sudden they're saying, the Spirit forbid us to do this or that. Is it just a cliche-ish type of phrase that they're using here? Because, seriously, how many times have you guys talked about, well, this happened, must be the Spirit. All of a sudden we're giving credit to the Almighty. Maybe He didn't have anything to do with that particular incident that went on in our lives. Or, I think it's something that we have to be careful about, of giving credit to the Almighty when He had nothing to do. That was all you did that, okay? That had nothing to do about the set-apart Spirit. Maybe you had plans of doing something and you didn't think it out, right? And you got there, well, we got a flat tire, and because we never got the car fixed the right way. We got a flat tire, we did this or whatever, and all of a sudden this happens, that's happened. And all of a sudden we give credit to the Elohim. Oh, that's why He made that all happen. Maybe that's the way it happened. I'm just saying sometimes there's things that happen in our lives that, another one, I'll give you another example. You're in the wrong for doing something, okay? All right? So, or you didn't do what was correct, okay? Let me see. How can I use this one? You were to be at a particular place at a particular time. And then all of a sudden, because of you got sidetracked, you wasn't able to be there at that time. And all of a sudden something else happens. And all of a sudden it's a godsend that had happened. And what I think is a lot of times, maybe that's a bad example. So ditch what I'm talking about. I'm not able to convey what I'm saying in that. But maybe just the bottom line is, think about all the time when things happen in your life, okay? Okay, because sometimes it might be your fault and not the Father doing it, okay? So we have to be on guard in that manner of giving credit to the Spirit, or the Father did this when He did not do that. That's your pure negligence on something, okay? And that's not to say that the Father cannot teach us through those things. And, so I know I'm being maybe way too vague, but again, let's not let's not bring the Spirit into some of these things where it is not him at work. And if you guys have any other insights or comments on that, that would be great. No? Okay. So it very well could be just a saying. Something went on, whatever happened, they're saying the Spirit didn't allow us to go that way. There was a roadblock that day. So it was the Spirit hindered us from heading that way or whatever it might be. Yes, Kathy.
I had a friend of mine, and she fell off a horse, and she was very upset and crying and saying, what did I do to God to make this happen to me?
Maybe getting on the horse.
And and she was very upset, and I was like, well, I was trying to comfort her, but like you said about the horse, it's not God's fault.
No, exactly. And I think that's a perfect example. Thank you, Kathy. Because at the same time, if we're doing things, if we prepare the best we can, you get to know how a horse operates, right? And you know, that would be the case, be on your guard of what you're doing. And if you're negligent and something happens, it's not that the Father can't heal you, teach you from that incident, but maybe from the beginning, that happened because of the circumstances around that. There was a negligence on our part, maybe. So, anyhow, it's just something I wanted to explore because I think, anyhow, I'll continue on. And in passing through Musa, they came down to Taus. And in a night vision appeared to Saul a man, a Macedonian, who was standing, begging him and saying, come over to Macedonia and help us. Now, the interesting thing, what we just read, there was no vision about the Spirit in 6 and 7, what we are just talking about. It just plainly said the Spirit kept us from going that way. But here, we have a different circumstance going on here. Whatever this was, it was different. So, it's something, at the other hand, I'm going to flip everything I just said to, are we to take the 6 and 7, those two verses that we just read, and then 8 and 9, are we to take them as a whole? But there was no vision mentioned. Was there visions mentioned in the whole thing about not going into Asia? But it doesn't say, but at the same time, is this to be understood as a whole? Either way, it's interesting. This man in the vision, ultimately, we will see he represents a people, not necessarily a single human being. And we'll see how that will play out. Because the next time from this vision, Paul doesn't even meet any men. It's women who he runs into. So you can see the vagueness that is in this dream or this vision that Paul had. And this is what provokes him to change his direction. So is it all to be taken as a whole? Maybe there was some kind of resistance as they were heading along. Whatever happens, they wanted to head up into Asia, and something happened, and hindrance. Maybe you could say it was the set-apart Spirit held us back from doing such and such. Because I'm not saying that that's never the case. I'm just saying let's be more cautious about the wording or how we give credit to certain things. Because we can be over-religiously in our language. Maybe that's a good way to say it. So, all of a sudden, whatever's going on, they go down to Taus. That's where they're at now. Now, you'll notice here, where they're headed is Macedonia. It's in the left-hand corner of the map. Right, yes. Just check and make sure you've seen it. So this also would be Europe today, and specifically it's Greece. Okay? So that's going to add a little bit more behind the situations that's going to happen here. This is the ultimate destination that this man in the vision spoke about. So, and when he saw that vision, Paul, immediately, we thought to go to Macedonia, concluding that the Master had called us to bring the good news to them. Therefore, sailing from Taos, we ran straight course to, this is another interesting word, Samothrace. Okay, it's a small island. And then next they came to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is the principal city of the part of Macedonia, a colony. And we were staying in the city for some days, and on the Sabbath day, we went outside the city by a river where there used to be prayer. And having sat down, we were speaking to the women who meet there. So you see, in that vision, this Macedonian man was just, in some sense, symbolic of going, because they run into women that are here. So we'll do this map real quick so you can see where they're going. They hit that island, go up to Neapolis to Philippi. So we're now in Philippi. We're in Macedonia, or really Greece, we would know it. And when he saw this vision, this is what they did. I'm going to 10, verse 10 is interesting. Do you notice something that changes there? Remember I told you about there's Timothy, Silas, and Paul. And I said there was somebody else that joined the group, but his name is not mentioned. Because you look at verse 10, and when he saw, meaning Paul, immediately we. That's a first person idea. So there's a we all of a sudden here. So this we, and later us, there's another person here, and as I was looking through, I conclude what other people are saying. This is the author. This is the author of the book here. Who would that author be? John? Who wrote Acts? Luke. So Luke wrote Luke, and Luke and Acts are, remember when we studied, they seemed to be one piece of work, only later on they were divided. So we have Luke. So somewhere Luke, most likely here in Taos, Luke joins the team. Okay? So what that means is then, if Luke is just joining up now and he's writing, everything to this point, Luke would be gathering from Paul, some other eyewitnesses, and compiled that most likely at a later date. So, but from here on is like eyewitness from, at least this section, eyewitness from Luke, because he's along with this journey. And I think that's important. I think it's very important, understanding these little nuances that are in the text that help us understand more what's going on, and the validity that we have Luke, the author, credited here. And then that even goes back to the book of Luke and the beginning part of Acts as well. So that would suggest then Luke is getting information that from Paul or Silas. They had plenty of time on the road, as you can see, where they've traveled. So maybe Luke was taking notes and saying, okay, Paul, tell me about yourself. And Paul's going into all that had happened, what he learned from Peter and all those, because there's a lot of places that's mentioned in the beginning of Acts that Paul's not a part of. It's Peter. So, but later on we learn that, how Paul goes down and he eventually meets Peter and the rest of them, and how all that goes. So, however this is being related to Luke, the beginning parts of Acts, I don't know, but I think it's eating. So, right now is then eyewitnessing from the author of the book. This would be Luke. If we jump down to 13, and there might be little discrepancies, I don't want to, not necessarily discrepancies, but depending on your translations here. Verse 13 is interesting. I'm going to read the Aramaic because I think it sheds a little bit more light on maybe what's happening here. Okay? 13. In the Aramaic, it says there's a house of prayer. A house of prayer was seen there. Okay, so this is the Shabbat day. They're going outside the city. So on the outside of the city, another Aramaic reads, and when we departed, we departed on the Sabbath day outside the gate of the city by the river, because there was seen a house of prayer. And when we sat down, we were speaking with the women who had gathered there. So it seems like it's mainly women here on the side of the riverbank on this Shabbat day. Possible that there was no synagogue in this particular city. I didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of research on that part of it, but we've seen from Paul, it was the tradition on Shabbat day to go to the synagogue and all his other travels. So I'm just giving you what I'm thinking is going on. It seems like maybe there wasn't a synagogue in this city, but yet there were still Jews that were gathering at a house, a gathering place to pray. Because that's what he normally said that he did over and over again. Yes, and we have, Pat has her hand up.
They wouldn't have been welcome to speak up if there had been a synagogue, because women weren't respected.
Oh, that very well could be. But it is interesting here. So thank you, Pat. So this vision, ultimately, what I was saying, it's bringing the good news to them. Yes, sister, I'm sorry.
There was a city gate at Philippi that said over it that no foreign religion should be brought into the city.
Oh, that is very good information, because that's going to play a part later on, and we see maybe what happens here at Philippi with them. Oh, very good piece of information. Thank you, sister. So if there's nothing more, we'll continue to see what's going to be going on here. Oh, another hand's up? I'm sorry.
In addition to what Pat said, the word colony used here, and I don't see it right now in this.
Yes, there was a colony of Jews, it seemed. At least that's what I was assuming.
I'll have to look at the verse again, but anyway, talking about they went to the major city, and within that city there was a colony. So the word colony usually means it's a group of people that were somewhere else that have moved to a new location, but they have remained tied to their parent place of origin.
Yes.
They're not part of the local culture. And it's also interesting that these women, who, Pat is correct, women were not permitted to be taught. They were kept isolated at home. So these women that were gathering are of a different culture or nature than what is there in the city.
All right. No, thank you, Polly. So that would make sense of what's going on here. And to me, it's always interesting to know like the backstory of things that helps us understand the text even more. So a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of purple from the city Thionia, worshiping Elohim, was hearing whose heart the master did open to pay attention to what Paul said. And when she was immersed and her household, she begged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be believing in the master, come to my house and stay." And she urged us. And it came to be as we went to pray and this seems to be happening at the same time here. And it came to be as we went to pray that a certain slave girl possessed with the spirit of Puthon, did meet us, who brought her masters much profit by foretelling. So let's go back up to 14. She opened her heart to what she was hearing. Now, I'm just going to guess here. It seems to be they were, I think, in some ways, it very well could be that they were Jewish, a colony outside, so they had some connection with the God of Israel. It does say they were worshiping Elohim. I think maybe in the text they would have said that they were worshiping some other false deity, possibly. But at the end of the day, whatever Paul was sharing, she was willing to hear this, and something moved within her. Mark.
In light of what we had talked about in our study about, what was the book called about women? Anyway, so in verse 15 it says, "When she was baptized and her house, she besought us, saying, If you have judged me to be faithful, come to my house and abide there." So she's got authority to say, I want to be baptized, I want all my house to be baptized, and I'm going to invite you all to come into the house. So she's not a woman that doesn't have authority here. She's a woman who has some level of authority to request all of her household to be baptized without anyone else's okay or consent, and to come into the home without anyone else's consent. So in other words, I would say that there weren't many women that lived by themselves, because it would have been the way that things were. So there would have been underneath, been a husband or man within the relationship. So it's just an interesting scenario here about, this is in light of what we know about Greece, where the women were suppressed, this woman wasn't.
No, and I think that's very good to point out. You had mentioned, it seems like she has no husband here. It seemed like, and I think she was a very wealthy woman from what she sold, selling high-end fabric that was very, very expensive. So she dealt with that. So it sounds like, there was no husband, and she ran her own household here at this place. Polly.
So I want to go back a little bit to starting to what you mentioned about they were forbidden by the Spirit to speak or share. So I relate to this a little bit because this is a little glimpse into our own life. So we walk out our life in faith that we have entered into a covenant relationship with the Most High. He's a part of our life. We're a part of His. We live our life not as isolated beings, but He is a part of us. He's given His Holy Spirit to us to lead, guide, direct, and go before us to prepare the way. So when we get up each morning, we are, and lie down at night, we are giving thanks that He is with us, that He's establishing our steps, that He's going before us. So we don't think that things that happen in a day are just coincidence, because our faith has been put in that we trust He is making the way. So when He opens doors and shuts doors, we don't think it's coincidence. We see that He is guiding us, and if He forbids or closes a door in one direction, we wait to see where it is we're going. So I kind of relate to this, to what you're saying in this story. I understand somebody outside of that relationship with the Most High that would be just using this as a slang term could be different, but I think it would be different defined in the boundaries of a believer that is entered into a covenant relationship with the Most High, depending on Him and relying on Him and putting their faith and trust that He's going before them to make a way. So that being said, as you show the map of where they traveled, it's only by the trade winds, if I'm saying this correctly, that ship could have gone on that pattern to those different cities that it traveled to, which I believe the Most High is directing that, so that ship could have went there. And I find it interesting that He not only guided them there, but directed them through a dream in the night and directed them to this city, to this place, to this colony that is women. He directed them to a group of women, because it says Lydia worshiped God in 14. So there was something there that the Father knew was stirring in the hearts of these women. And yes, they may have been Jewish women, but I see that they probably were not under Jewish authority or rabbinic authority, because that would have been forbidden. These were, yes, Mark said, Hebrew women, which I believe are correct, who believed in the Most High, and the Father knew that there was a work that could be started in the hearts of these women that had gathered there.
No, I agree. And by no means, thank you, Polly, by no means is what I was talking before. It's, I'm not saying that we are not guided by the Spirit. I'm just saying let's be on more guard on how we relate that, But thank you, Polly, because we do see in this story where it's heading, So I'm not trying to take any credit from the Most High, or I'm not trying to supplant anything. It's just I'm more us being on our guard of what we do. But thank you, Polly. So most likely, this was a wealthy woman from the background, some of the stuff I looked at, because of what she sold. It was highly prized. So with her whole household, I read a lot. Usually, if she ran the household, that meant whether the whole household believed her or not, the whole household followed what the master of the house followed, regardless. Okay, even though they didn't have it in their heart, they still followed the guidelines of whatever the master of the house sets forth as being the religion. You can flip it any other. Whatever religion she decides her household or her master decides the house is going to follow, that's what everyone's going to do, So that's some of the things I was learning in my research. So, but I want to come down to, this is going to be an interesting thing. Now, verse 16. In your Bibles, depending, it's translated various ways. It says, and there came to be, as we went to pray, that a certain slave girl possessed with, yours might have divination in your translation. Or the spirit of the snake. That's in some unique translations. So I was fascinated by this only because it's saying, as I was looking, the Greek does not say divination. So if the Greek is not proclaiming that, the Aramaic That's where actually the Greek word is here is the same as the Aramaic as well. It is the spirit of Puthon. But if we would pronounce that more how we would read it in English, it's the spirit of Python. What makes this interesting, or I said, we'll get a little bit of background here, and then I'll share some other things as my research on it for maybe what's happening here. So in the Greek mythology, that's where we're at, the Python serpent or dragon that dwelt in the region, it's all, this particular cult or religion is based on this Python, okay, and also this python, this snake, so to speak. Alongside of it is also the oracles of Delphi or Delphi. Oracles meaning they are people who would speak for the gods. Now, this is interesting in many ways. So if it is this, not the spirit of divination, maybe that's behind the whole thing, but if it's specifically saying one particular occult or belief system, then I'm like, okay, I want to understand what's behind this particular system that was here. So I have a little bit of background about this slave girl. Because we're talking about women here, and this slave girl that pops up here. First of all, obviously, she was part of a cult or another type of worship system. What I found is this system where she was a part of was very well known through the ancient Mediterranean area. Very well known. Very well high prized to hear what this oracle or what the oracles would say that come from Delphi or Delphi. I think even Alexander the Great, a lot of your kings in Babylon wanted to know certain things about their life, and they came here. This was the top university of speaking to foreign gods, foreign prophets, okay, for the ancient world. So, yes.
So in verse 16 it says, she brought her masters much gain by soothsaying. So could this be in the day? I mean, because today's human trafficking, the slave brings the owners much profit. And so this is a form of trafficking because she's being used for gain and for profit by her, this is saying her masters, but we would have used a different word today.
Oh, no, she is enslaved, and there is money that's being exchanged for what she does or whatever talent she has. Paul, I'll let you go, and I'll give you some more information on this background of this whole cult.
Well, I might be stepping in your waters then. Should I let you say what you're going to say?
It's up to you. It doesn't matter.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
Okay. So this whole idea of the Oracle of Delphi, like I said, it's prestigious. It was the highest. Her answers guided civilizations. Like I mentioned, Babylon, kings and everything. Whatever she said came from this. That's what they did. That is interesting. Whether they go to war or not, making new settlements, wisdom, all this came from a lot of the ancient world, at least the hierarchy, the kings and commanders, they would go there. Every major Greek or Roman leader, soldier, or politician would most likely travel there to Delphi, where this cult was established, okay? Or they would send others there to inquire what they wanted to do. So the thing is, this went on even in the Roman Empire until Constantine, when he came to Christianity, then it kind of was squashed out. But so it's at this time, even when Paul's here, everyone knew who she was. That's why they specifically, I believe, mentioned it, because they knew exactly who this woman was, this slave girl was, and all what was behind it to some extent. The whole story, I'll go briefly through it. It was a community where it was. It was like 100 miles northwest of Athens. The Greek mythology declares that Zeus let loose 2 eagles to find the most beautiful location on the planet Earth, right? The eagles circled the land, and this is where it happens to be. The Greeks believed that Delphi to be the center of the universe revolved around here. So what they did, they built a temple to the god Apollo at this area. And the temple, because of Apollo, he was the one who ended up killing this python, this big snake. Okay? And it rotted and whatever, and that's why these smells, why it's associated to this idea of what it smells like. But they build a place over this section, okay? And this is what I think is interesting. This is where, here it is. Apollo was often called a Python Apollo, meaning the snake Apollo, because he allegedly killed this giant python snake at Delphi and took the oracles of Delphi for his bride, his own. So the women who served as these oracles here, they were given in the honor of because of Apollo. Now this section, two great stones that guarded this area, the way this temple was built and why they built it there. This is the part that I think is interesting. Let me get down to that part. They would get women from this village. They would choose women from this village, and that means these priests would choose these women. There's the masters that Mark had mentioned about. So they would choose these women. What I think is fascinating, there's a geographical fault line here at Delphi. And out of this crack line, fault line, came up gases. And that's where these priestesses, these slave girls or whatever, that's where they would be, right? What came out of the ground was methane and ethylene and ethene, okay? Ultimately, it caused hallucinogenic happenings in the mind. It was hallucinogenic, this stuff that came up out of the ground where they would place these women. Later on, some of those gases, that's how we got anesthesia as well. Okay? So this is the background of this slave girl being exposed to this over and over and over again. And through her mutterings or whatever, her hallucination, her whatever vision she had, the questions that were given to you, they were, from what I read, they were all kind of vague in some ways, but yet this is the guidance to the ancient world, was in so much coming from these, like I said, how they affected the whole world in that sense. And that's why they were popular for various reasons. And actually, there was one reason why they were popular. But this hallucinogenic gases, they collected here because they would cap it off. That's what they would inhale and go into, become in some kind of trance, sway, say whatever they say to whatever's being asked. And then the various things would be recorded. Yes.
Yeah, we know from studies that have been done, like with DMT and some of these hallucinogenic gases, that they can break down your natural barriers, your hedges of protection that Yahweh gave us. And when you lose those protections, you become you can be influenced and taken over by these spiritual forces that can at times were influencing these women to say things. And one of the things they told one of the rulers, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but this was in the first couple hundred years after Yeshua, they are the ones, she is the one that told the ruler to get rid of the Christians because they represented a threat to Delphi and their system. And that began the persecution of the Christians. So that's where it originated, was Delphi.
No, that's interesting.
And you had those gases coming. You mentioned those gases. Well, some of the sulfur compounds also made the area smell very bad.
Yes. So, yes, go ahead. And then we'll probably have to close, and we can come back to this next week, and we'll see next week how Paul responds and why, maybe knowing some of what's going on behind the scene. Yes, sister.
I was having this explained to me by in Delphi by a Greek friend, and she was saying at first they would pick young girls to do this. They would have to fast for several days, be cleansed before they went to smell the fumes. And then their babblings would be interpreted by the priest, who could sway world events, battles, kings, and that by how they interpreted the babblings. And as these young women became older and wiser, they became a liability. So then they started recruiting old peasant women to come smell the fumes.
That's interesting. So there's a lot behind this whole thing, as you can see. Paul running into this slave girl, and why I believe it says she possessed with a spirit of Puthon rather than a spirit of divination. The Greeks wording that for a reason. So that's some of what I will have to come back next week and explore that a little bit further and see why Paul reacted the way he did. Because it's interesting, not to give it away, but she was proclaiming the same thing in some sense that Paul was proclaiming. So, we'll come back next week. Father, Yahweh, great and mighty you are. There is none like you. Father, we thank you for your love and your mercy. And Father, help us to grow closer to you, to one another. And Father, empower us with your Spirit so we can overcome all things that come before us. I thank you. Amen. Shabbat shalom, everyone. And those online, thanks for joining us. We'll be back here next week.